Before your name was ever spoken, before your lungs filled with the first breath of life, a vault was gift-wrapped and sealed within you. Not out there in the world, not in the mountains of Tanzania, not in the depths of the Congo, not beneath the oceans, but within you. In your mind. In your spirit. In that place where thought is born and destiny is shaped. And inside that vault lies more wealth than all the mines of South Africa, more power than all the oil fields of Nigeria, more brilliance than all the diamonds ever cut and polished in Botswana. I am not speaking in metaphors. I am giving you fact. There is no treasure greater than what lies untapped in the mind of a human being with purpose. Willpower. Imagination. Definiteness of decision. And the burning desire to act. These are not decorations. They are tools. They are fire. They are fuel. And you were given them on purpose. But here's the cruel joke. Most men will go to their graves with their vaults locked tight. Rich on the inside, bankrupt in the world. They will leave behind resumes, not legacies. They will spend their lives guarding the gold but never lifting a single shovel to extract it. Let me be clear, I did not come to entertain you. I came to provoke you. To awaken you. Inspiration is weak. It fades. It disappears the moment comfort returns. But a challenge? A challenge demands an answer. So here it is, when are you going to start digging? You want greatness? Then you must claim it. No one is coming to mine that gold for you. No one is going to swing the axe, break the rock, sweat the sweat. That is your job. That is the price. And the moment you stop blaming the government, your upbringing, your luck, your timing, that is the moment you start tapping into the real wealth that's been sitting inside you all along. The question is not do you have what it takes. You were born with what it takes. The real question is, will you pay the price to unlock it? Welcome to Timbuktu Lectures. A production of Kilimanjaro News Network, the authentic voice of Africa. We studied the lives of over 25,000 men and women who achieved extraordinary success, and I can tell you this with mathematical certainty. Every single one from Nelson Mandela to Aliko Dangote, from Mo Ibrahim to Barack Obama. These men who went from shadows to statues. Not by magic. Not by chance. But by mastery. They mastered themselves. They mastered self-discipline, initiative, and definite purpose. These are not traits of the lucky. These are choices of the determined. Mandela. Dangote. Maathai. Ilumelu. Mo Ibrahim. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Obama. These are not exceptions. These are examples. Each one cracked open the vault within. Each one refused to wait for rescue. They changed their inner world and the outer world had no choice but to bend to their will. Because this is law. Let me be absolutely clear, you were born with the same raw material. The same power. The same potential. Not the wealth of land, but the wealth of thought. Not diamonds around your neck, but vision in your mind and iron in your will. You were not made to drift. You were built to drive. Not built to obey orders, but to write them. Not born to fit in, but to stand out and stand up. You were not assigned a life. You were equipped for a mission. And make no mistake, the mission is yours alone. So when you hear that whisper in your chest, the one that says, there is more, do not ignore it. That is not delusion. That is destiny clearing its throat. That is your soul waking up. Ignore it and you will live a quiet tragedy. Answer it and you will uncover riches that make gold and diamonds look like trinkets. The path is not blocked. It's simply unwalked. Success does not knock. It waits for no one. It is claimed, not given. And it is always claimed by those bold enough to act. So let me ask you, not kindly, not gently, but with urgency and fire. Will you mine the treasure within you or will you die with it buried? No more lies. No more excuses. You're not confused. You're not stuck. You're just afraid. And fear is a coward's excuse. You picked up this message because something inside you is already awake. Already screaming. That scream? That's not noise. That's your calling. And it's getting louder by the day. You don't need another pat on the back. You don't need more time. You need a decision. If comfort is what you seek, stop listening to this lecture. Find a soft pillow and sleepwalk through life. But if transformation is what you came for, then get up. Grip the pickaxe. Dig. The mine is deep. The work is hard. But the treasure is yours. Now prove you were worthy of it. Today, I'm going to reveal to you a set of immutable laws, not suggestions, not philosophies, but laws, and if you have the courage to follow them, the discipline to apply them, you will unlock the vast, untapped wealth buried within you. These are not man-made promises. These are truths etched into the structure of success itself, the same laws that every great man or woman has obeyed to rise from nothing to significance. Follow them, and you will live, not just survive, but live at the level your Creator designed you for. You will mine the gold and diamonds buried in your soul, and you will rise. So I say this once, and I say it with fire. Pay attention. Your future is listening. The first law. The law of divine assignment. You were sent, not born by accident. Every human being arrives on this earth with one of two mindsets. They either believe they were sent here with a specific mission, or they believe they're here by random chance. The first group becomes legends. The second group becomes statistics. Which group do you belong to? Don't answer too quickly. Look at your bank account. Look at your relationships. Look at the impact you're making on the world around you. Your current results are the perfect reflection of which mindset you've been operating from. Consider Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest man. When he was just 20 years old, selling sweets and crackers from a small storefront in Kano, Nigeria, every rational voice around him said he should be satisfied with small-scale trading. His formal education was limited. His resources were minimal. The Nigerian economic environment was hostile to ambitious young Africans. But Dangote operated from a different frequency. He didn't see himself as just another small trader hoping to make ends meet. He saw himself as someone sent to transform Africa's industrial landscape. When others saw cement as just another commodity, he envisioned a continental empire. When others feared taking on established multinational corporations, he saw an opportunity to prove that African excellence could compete with, and defeat, anyone. By 2008, when the global financial crisis was devastating businesses worldwide, Dangote was expanding aggressively. While others retrenched, he invested $3.3 billion in a cement plant. Why? Because he understood a principle that escapes most people. When you operate from the consciousness of one who was sent, economic conditions become irrelevant. Today, Dangote Group operates in over 15 African countries, employs over 100,000 people, and has transformed the industrial capacity of an entire continent. But here's what most people miss. His success wasn't about business acumen alone. It was about understanding his assignment and refusing to negotiate with anything that tried to limit it. The uncomfortable question. What assignment are you negotiating with? What divine instruction have you been diluting, compromising, or postponing? Let me tell you about a man who had every reason to believe he wasn't sent for greatness. A man whose very identity seemed to disqualify him from his destiny. In 2000, Barack Hussein Obama was a 39-year-old state senator from Illinois who had just suffered a humiliating political defeat. He had challenged incumbent Congressman Bobby Rush for his seat in the U.S. House of Representatives and lost by a crushing 61% to 30% margin. The loss wasn't just electoral, it was existential. The Chicago political establishment dismissed him as an academic who didn't understand real politics. His wife Michelle was questioning whether his political ambitions were worth the financial sacrifice they were making. They were drowning in student loan debt, struggling to pay for their young daughter's needs, and their marriage was strained to the breaking point. But September 11, 2001, changed everything and made Obama's path to prominence seem impossible. Here was a man with the middle name Hussein. The same name as America's newest enemy, Saddam Hussein. Trying to build a political career in a country now consumed with fear of Islamic terrorism. Political consultants told him to consider changing his name or at least dropping the Hussein. His own advisors suggested he distance himself from his multicultural background. Every rational calculation suggested he should quit politics and return to law, where he could provide financial security for his family without the constant humiliation of being an outsider, trying to break into an establishment that didn't want him. But Obama understood something that his critics didn't. When you're operating from divine assignment, your greatest liabilities become your greatest assets. In 2004, when he was selected to give the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention, seasoned politicians warned him not to be too black or too intellectual for mainstream America. Instead, Obama delivered a speech that transformed him from an unknown state senator into a national phenomenon overnight. He didn't hide his unusual name or his complex heritage, he made them central to his message of American possibility. By 2008, the same liabilities that should have disqualified him, his limited experience, his unusual background, his intellectual demeanor, became the very reasons America chose him over more qualified candidates like Hillary Clinton and John McCain. Here is the principle. When you accept your assignment and stop apologizing for who you are, the universe begins to reorganize itself around your purpose. Let me ask you an uncomfortable question. What about yourself? What are you trying to hide, change, or apologize for? What if those very things are your greatest qualifications for your assignment? The second law. The law of sovereign consciousness. You must stop asking permission to exist. Here's a truth that will disturb you. Every day you wake up seeking validation from others is another day you betray your divine assignment. Most people live their entire lives as refugees in their own existence. They apologize for their dreams, dilute their visions, and seek permission from people who are living far beneath their own potential. This is not humility, this is spiritual treason. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, but he never spent a single day as a prisoner. While his body was confined on Robben Island, his consciousness remained sovereign. Prison guards, government officials, and international leaders had to negotiate with him as if he were already the president he would eventually become. How is this possible? Because Mandela understood that external circumstances cannot imprison a consciousness that refuses to be diminished. In 1985, when the apartheid government offered to release him if he would publicly renounce violence, Mandela's response revealed the mind of a man who had never relinquished his internal authority. What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts. Think about the audacity of that statement. Here was a man who had been imprisoned for over 2 decades, being offered freedom by the most powerful government in Africa, and he rejected it because the terms were inconsistent with his divine assignment. He chose 5 more years in prison rather than compromise his mission. When he finally walked free in 1990, he didn't emerge as a grateful former prisoner. He emerged as the leader of a nation, ready to negotiate the transfer of power from his former captors to himself. Here's the principle. Your consciousness determines your reality, not your circumstances. Let me ask you something that might make you angry. What prison have you built for yourself, and what keys are you refusing to use? Most people are not imprisoned by external circumstances, they're imprisoned by their own limited thinking. They've convinced themselves that they need more education before they can start, more money before they can invest, more connections before they can network, more experience before they can lead, more confidence before they can act. This is not prudence, this is cowardice dressed up as wisdom. Mary McLeod Bethune was born in 1875 to former slaves in South Carolina. She was the 15th of 17 children. When she founded what would become Bethune-Cookman University in 1904, she had $1.50 in her pocket, no building, no faculty, and no students. The entire educational establishment told her that a black woman with her background had no business starting a college. But Bethune operated from sovereign consciousness. She didn't ask the white educational establishment for permission. She didn't wait until she had adequate funding. She didn't postpone her vision until she felt ready. She rented a small cabin, recruited 5 students, and began teaching. When she needed furniture, she made it from discarded crates. When she needed books, she created relationships with benefactors who believed in her vision. When she needed credibility, she delivered results that spoke louder than her critics' doubts. By the time of her death in 1955, her university had grown to over 1,000 students and was recognized as one of the premier black educational institutions in America. She had served as an advisor to 4 U.S. presidents and had become one of the most influential African American women of her era. Fatima Alfiria was not born into ease, but she was born into purpose. In the 9th century, in the ancient city of Fez, Morocco, while most of the world still drowned in ignorance, she looked at the crumbling limits of her time and refused to bow. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant, yes, but don't mistake resources for permission. Wealth may open doors, but only willpower kicks them down. After the deaths of her husband and father, Fatima inherited a fortune, but she did not squander it on vanity. She did not retreat into luxury or shrink into silence. She built a university. Let me make this plain, not a library. Not a classroom. A university, the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, founded in 859 CE. The oldest continually operating university in the world. Older than Oxford. Older than Bologna. Older than every Western institution that now holds itself as the gold standard of education. And she did this in a world that told women to remain invisible. In a time that reserved scholarship for men. In a society that said no, and she replied, "Watch me." Fatima Alfiria did not beg for permission. She did not wait for the scholars of her day to recognize her vision. She did not delay until the political climate was favorable. She moved with definite purpose, with the calm, immovable fire of someone who knows her place in history isn't to be given, it's to be taken. She fasted throughout the entire construction of the university, dedicating every breath to her mission. She didn't just fund it, she oversaw it, personally. She wasn't a donor. She was a founder. A builder. A visionary whose compass was not approval, but legacy. And what did she create? A university that would produce mathematicians, astronomers, poets, philosophers, theologians, and physicians. A citadel of knowledge where minds were sharpened, where generations were forged. Understand this, Fatima didn't just break barriers. She didn't acknowledge them. She operated from a level of consciousness most people will never touch, sovereign consciousness. The awareness that your purpose is not contingent on permission. That your power is not dependent on precedent. She lived in a time that said a woman's place was in the home. She redefined what that meant by making the world her house, and turning it into a temple of learning. And what's your excuse? You say you need more time. More money. More support. Fatima started with vision and conviction, the only 2 currencies that matter when destiny is on the line. She did not wait to feel ready. She made herself ready by acting. By building. By becoming. So ask yourself, what empire of the mind are you delaying because you're still asking for permission to start? Fatima didn't ask. She declared. She didn't hope. She executed. And the world still echoes with her impact, more than 1,000 years later. The question is not whether you have greatness inside you. The question is, will the world ever see it, or will it die buried under your fear? Fatima answered. Now it's your turn. Let me ask you an uncomfortable question. What have you been waiting for permission to start? Who appointed these permission granters as the gatekeepers of your destiny? The 3rd law. This is the law of inevitable manifestation. When you move, the universe moves. Here's a law that operates whether you believe in it or not. The moment you begin to act in alignment with your assignment, resources that were previously invisible become available. This isn't mystical thinking, it's observable reality. But most people never experience it because they never take the first step. They're waiting for the resources to appear before they act. This is exactly backward. Here's a law that does not ask for your agreement. It doesn't wait for your approval. It simply operates. The moment you move in alignment with your assignment, forces begin to shift. Doors open. Resources appear. And what was once invisible begins to emerge, not because it wasn't there, but because you weren't. This is not magic. It's not mysticism. It's mechanics. But most people never witness it, because most people never start. They're standing at the edge of purpose, arms folded, waiting for clarity, for funding, for a guarantee. But the universe doesn't respond to hesitation. It responds to decision. Wangari Maathai was born in 1940, in the heart of Kenya, under British colonial rule. A girl child in a rural village, in a culture and time that didn't believe girls needed education, let alone purpose. But she had something stronger than approval. She had vision. She earned a scholarship, went to the United States, then returned home with not just degrees, but a fire. She saw her country's forests being stripped, its soil bleeding dry, its people, especially women, suffering in silence. The government? Silent. The corporations? Greedy. The people? Powerless. But Wangari didn't ask for permission to act. She didn't submit a proposal to fate. She planted a tree. And then another. And another. And she trained women to do the same. No press. No budget. Just a shovel, a seedling, and a mission that couldn't be outsourced. And here's where the law kicks in. The moment she moved, the universe moved with her. What began as one woman planting trees became the Green Belt movement, a grassroots revolution that empowered over 900,000 women, planted more than 50 million trees, and changed the environmental consciousness of an entire continent. She faced arrest, intimidation, beatings. The Kenyan government labeled her a mad woman. But a person who knows their assignment cannot be discredited by those who fear it. Wangari was beaten, but not broken. Jailed, but not silenced. She understood something the fearful never will. Setbacks are not signs to stop, they are signals to dig deeper. She stood in front of bulldozers with nothing but her body and her belief. And in time, the world followed. In 2004, she became the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, not because she waited, but because she moved. That's how it works. Not just for her. For anyone who dares to step forward before the whole path is visible. You say you're waiting for resources. Wangari planted a tree with her bare hands. You say the system is against you. She stood in front of armed men with nothing but courage. You say you're not ready. She started with a seed and an idea. The truth is, you're not stuck. You're just stalling. The universe is not ignoring you. It's waiting on you to move. So here's the principle, as plain and sharp as a blade. Your assignment will manifest, but only if you act before the path is guaranteed. The money, the allies, the momentum, they're already in orbit. But they don't descend until you take the first step. Wangari took hers. Now it's your move. Let's return to Nelson Mandela, because his story illustrates a principle that most people find impossible to accept. Sometimes what appears to be your greatest obstacle is actually your greatest preparation. When Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964, it appeared to be the end of his political effectiveness. The apartheid government believed they had neutralized their most dangerous opponent. Mandela's own supporters wondered if the movement could survive without its most charismatic leader. But Mandela used his imprisonment as a 27-year leadership development program. While his contemporaries aged and lost their relevance in the rapidly changing political landscape, Mandela's time in prison allowed him to study his opponent's psychology and methodology, develop the patience and strategic thinking necessary for successful negotiations, build relationships with prison guards and officials who would later become allies, transform himself from a militant revolutionary into a statesman capable of leading a peaceful transition, become a global symbol of resistance that was more powerful than he could have been as a free political activist. By the time he was released in 1990, Mandela had become something that would have been impossible without his imprisonment. a leader who commanded moral authority with both black South Africans seeking justice and white South Africans fearing retribution. His first speech as a free man wasn't focused on revenge or bitterness. It was focused on reconciliation and nation-building. This transformation was only possible because he had used his imprisonment as preparation for his ultimate assignment: becoming the president who would heal a divided nation. Here is an uncomfortable question for you. What situation in your life that feels like imprisonment might actually be preparation for your assignment? What if your current limitations are actually developing the specific qualities you'll need for your ultimate purpose? The fourth law. The law of commanding presence. Stop rehearsing smallness. Most people practice being small every single day. They rehearse limitations, memorize excuses, and perfect the art of making themselves invisible. Then they wonder why the world treats them as if they don't matter. You cannot rise to a level of success that exceeds the vision you have of yourself. This is not motivational fluff. It is a law. Ironclad. Unforgiving. You will never outperform the picture you hold in your mind of who you are and what you are here to do. Mo Ibrahim understood this. Not intellectually, but viscerally. Born in Sudan, raised in the crucible of post-colonial Africa, Mo didn't come from a dynasty. He wasn't groomed by elites. He wasn't born into corridors of power or wealth. He was a black African man, an immigrant, entering the tech world at a time when the only vision the West had for Africa was famine, failure, and foreign aid. And yet, he saw himself as sovereign. Not as a subject of systems, but as their architect. In the late 1990s, when the world was obsessed with Silicon Valley, Mo Ibrahim launched Keltel, a telecommunications company aimed not at New York or London, but at the heart of Africa. While the global business class laughed, Ibrahim stared into the desert, into the forest, into villages where phones had never rung, and he saw a future no one else was bold or awake enough to see. He didn't see poverty. He saw potential. He didn't see infrastructure gaps. He saw open terrain. He didn't see emerging markets. He saw a continent ready to rise. While Western telecom giants dismissed Africa as too poor, too volatile, too disconnected, Ibrahim made a decision: he would not fight for scraps at someone else's table. He would build the damn table. He didn't just install cell towers. He built trust in regions torn by war and corruption. He created business models that respected local needs and realities. He refused bribes. He refused shortcuts. He redefined what African business could look like. In a few short years, Keltel was operating in 14 countries, serving over 24 million people. He sold it for $3.4 billion. But more than the money, he proved something dangerous to the old world order. That Africa was not a charity case. That Africans were not passive recipients of development. That we are builders, visionaries, architects of our own destiny. And he wasn't done. He took a significant portion of his wealth and established the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, creating a prize for good governance in Africa, worth more than the Nobel Prize. Why? Because he understood something the world still hasn't caught up to. Leadership is the bottleneck. Vision is the multiplier. Like Steve Jobs, he saw beyond the market to the mind. Like Steve Jobs, he sold belief in something bigger than a product. But unlike Steve Jobs, he built his empire from Africa outward, not the other way around. Here's the principle: burn it into your mind. The world will never value you beyond the level at which you value your own vision. When Jobs returned to Apple, he changed the story. When Ibrahim launched Keltel, he changed the continent's story. Both understood that reality does not respond to caution. It responds to conviction. So stop waiting for the market to believe in you. Stop tailoring your dreams to what others think is realistic. Command the world to see what you see. Speak it. Build it. Be it. That's how men like Mo Ibrahim rise, from Khartoum to the commanding heights of global business, not because they played the game, but because they rewrote the rules. Now the question is no longer whether you have a vision. The question is, do you have the courage to live up to it? Here's what you need to understand. Every interaction you have with the world is a reflection of how you see yourself. If you walk into a room apologizing for your presence, the room will treat you as an intrusion. If you speak about your dreams with hesitation and qualification, people will dismiss them as fantasies. If you present your ideas as if you're not sure they're worth considering, no one else will consider them either. Maya Angelou grew up in the segregated South, was sexually abused as a child, and was mute for several years as a result of her trauma. By every measure, she should have become someone who apologized for taking up space in the world. Instead, she developed what she called phenomenal woman consciousness. She didn't just overcome her limitations, she transformed them into sources of strength and wisdom that commanded respect from everyone she encountered. When she walked into a room, her presence announced that something important was about to happen. When she spoke, people leaned in, not just because of what she said, but because of how she carried herself as she said it. This wasn't arrogance, it was alignment. Angelou understood that she had been assigned to use her voice to heal, inspire, and elevate human consciousness. She carried herself in a way that honored that assignment. Here is the principle. Your assignment requires you to occupy space in the world as if you belong there, because you do. Here is an uncomfortable question for you. How are you rehearsing smallness? What words, postures, and behaviors are you practicing that communicate to the world that you don't believe in your own importance? The fifth law. The law of immediate obedience. Hesitation is disobedience. Here's the law that separates legends from the masses. The quality of your life is determined by the speed of your obedience to your inner instructions. Most people receive inner guidance constantly. They feel the nudge to make the phone call, write the book, start the business, have the conversation, take the risk. But then they hesitate. They analyze. They seek additional confirmation. They wait for better timing. This hesitation isn't prudence, it's disobedience. And disobedience to your inner guidance always results in a diminished life. Richard Branson has built a multi-billion-dollar empire across dozens of industries by following one simple principle. When he receives clear inner guidance about an opportunity, he acts immediately, even when, especially when, everyone else thinks it's a terrible idea. In 1984, when Branson was running Virgin Records, a successful but relatively small music company, he received what he later described as an irresistible urge to start an airline. This made no rational sense. He had no experience in aviation. The airline industry was dominated by massive, established carriers. The startup costs were enormous. His own advisors told him it would bankrupt Virgin Records. But Branson understood something that most entrepreneurs never learn. When you're operating from assignment consciousness, rational analysis becomes secondary to inner knowing. Instead of conducting extensive market research or developing detailed business plans, Branson immediately began acting on his guidance. He called Boeing to inquire about leasing aircraft. He recruited airline industry executives. He began developing Virgin Atlantic's revolutionary customer service approach. Within months, Virgin Atlantic was challenging British Airways' monopoly on lucrative transatlantic routes. The established airline industry spent millions trying to destroy Virgin Atlantic through predatory pricing and other anti-competitive practices. But they couldn't compete with a man who was operating from immediate obedience to his assignment. Today, the Virgin Group operates in over 40 countries across multiple industries, employs over 60,000 people, and generates billions in revenue annually. But it all started with a man who had learned to act immediately when he received inner guidance, regardless of external circumstances. Let's return to Barack Obama's story, because it perfectly illustrates the principle of immediate obedience in political context. In 2006, Obama had been a U.S. Senator for less than 2 years. He was still learning the ropes of federal politics. Conventional wisdom said he should spend at least 8 to 12 years building Senate seniority before considering a presidential run. Political experts told him he was not ready and should wait until 2016 or 2020. But Obama began receiving what he later described as an undeniable inner instruction: run now. This guidance made no rational sense. Hillary Clinton was the presumptive Democratic nominee with massive name recognition, fundraising capabilities, and institutional support. John Edwards had already established himself as the populist alternative. Obama would be competing against candidates who had been preparing for the presidency for years while he had been in federal office for less than 24 months. Every political calculation suggested he should wait. His wife Michelle was opposed to the idea. His own advisors were divided. The Democratic establishment was already committed to other candidates. But Obama understood that assignment timing is different from strategic timing. When your inner guidance says now, it means now. Not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are optimal, not when other people agree with your decision. On February 10, 2007, Obama announced his presidential candidacy on the steps of the old state capitol in Springfield, Illinois. Political pundits dismissed his campaign as a learning experience that would prepare him to run seriously in the future. 21 months later, he was president-elect of the United States. The principle, when you receive clear inner guidance about your next step, immediate obedience is the only appropriate response. Delay is disobedience, and disobedience always results in missed opportunities. The uncomfortable question. What inner instruction have you been receiving that you've been postponing, analyzing, or seeking additional confirmation for? What if the instruction itself is the confirmation? The sixth law. The law of resource magnetism. Commitment precedes resources. Here's a law that most people get exactly backward. You don't need resources to make a commitment. You need to make a commitment to attract resources. Most people are waiting for the money, the connections, the education, or the perfect circumstances before they fully commit to their assignment. This is precisely why they never get the resources they're waiting for. Aliko Dangote understood this principle when he was building his cement empire. In 2007, he made a commitment that shocked the African business community. He would build the largest cement plant in sub-Saharan Africa, capable of producing 3 million tons annually. This commitment was audacious for several reasons. Nigeria had never produced cement at this scale. The required investment was over $1 billion. Established international cement companies controlled the African market. He would be competing against global giants with decades of experience. When Dangote announced this commitment, he didn't have the full financing in place. He didn't have all the technical expertise required. He didn't have guaranteed customers for 3 million tons of cement annually. But he understood that commitment creates the energy field that attracts resources. Once he made the irrevocable decision to build Africa's largest cement plant, everything began to align. International lenders who had previously been skeptical became interested in financing the project. Technical experts from around the world began approaching him with solutions. Government officials who had been bureaucratic obstacles became collaborative partners. Potential customers began negotiating long-term purchase agreements. By 2010, Dangote Cement was not only the largest cement producer in Africa but was expanding into multiple African countries simultaneously. The commitment had created its own fulfillment. Nelson Mandela made the ultimate commitment in 1944 when he joined the African National Congress and dedicated his life to ending apartheid. At that time, white minority rule seemed permanent and unshakable. The apartheid government controlled every institution, military, economic, educational, religious. Black South Africans had no voting rights, limited economic opportunities, and faced imprisonment or death for political resistance. Making a commitment to end apartheid was like making a commitment to move a mountain with your bare hands. It seemed impossible. But Mandela understood that impossible commitments create possible outcomes. When you commit to something that seems beyond your resources or capabilities, you force the universe to respond with solutions you couldn't have imagined. Mandela's commitment wasn't just personal, it was total. He was willing to sacrifice his law practice, his family relationships, his freedom, and ultimately his life for the cause of liberation. This level of commitment created a magnetic field that attracted international support from governments and organizations worldwide, financial resources from unexpected sources, strategic allies within the apartheid government itself, moral authority that eventually made his vision inevitable. By 1994, the impossible had become reality. Mandela was inaugurated as the first black president of South Africa, and the apartheid system that had seemed permanent had been peacefully dismantled. Here is the principle. When your commitment is total, resources appear from sources you never expected, in ways you never anticipated. Here is an uncomfortable question for you. What commitment are you holding back from making because you don't see how it's possible? What if making the impossible commitment is exactly what will make it possible? The seventh law. The law of frequency alignment. You attract what you embody. The most sophisticated spiritual technology available to human beings is not found in any external system, it's the ability to align your daily frequency with your ultimate assignment. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. Most people are broadcasting confusion, doubt, and limitation while hoping to attract clarity, confidence, and abundance. This is like tuning your radio to static and wondering why you can't hear music. Aliko Dangote didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize and then become bold and visionary. She became bold and visionary, and the prize simply found its way to her. Long before the world knew her name, she walked through the ashes of war with the posture of a woman who had already seen peace. She carried herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a vessel of purpose. Even as Liberia burned, even as factions tore her country apart, she spoke and moved with the certainty of someone who knew history would one day remember her voice. When she began organizing women across religious, ethnic, and political lines, there was no applause. No cameras. Just risk, and ridicule, and silence. Experts said it wouldn't work. That Muslim and Christian women couldn't unite. That warlords wouldn't listen. That achieving peace in Liberia was a naive dream. But Lema didn't adjust her energy to match the hopelessness of her surroundings. She broadcast a frequency of defiant hope, of fierce compassion, of non-negotiable dignity. She led prayer meetings where tears turned to strategy. She sat at the edge of despair and spoke life into broken systems. She faced men with guns and told them, no more. Not as a plea, but as a command. And something shifted. From church halls to refugee camps, the movement caught fire. Within months, thousands of women were flooding the streets in white. Within a year, a tyrant was forced to the negotiating table. And in time, Liberia held free elections and chose Africa's first female president. In 2011, the world handed Aliko Dangote the Nobel Peace Prize. But here's what most people miss. That moment on the global stage was not the beginning of her greatness. It was simply the world finally tuning into a signal she had been transmitting all along. The power wasn't in the prize. The power was in the decision she made, again and again, to show up like peace was possible, even when no one else believed it. And that frequency? It's still on. Let me confront you with the uncomfortable truth about your current broadcast. At every tick of the clock, whether you realize it or not, you are sending out a silent but unmistakable signal to life itself, a declaration of who you believe you are, and what you truly believe you're worthy of receiving. This broadcast is not made of the pretty affirmations you recite in front of a mirror. It is not shaped by the grand ambitions you scribble in journals or declare at vision board parties. No, this frequency is carved from the bedrock of your dominant thoughts, your emotional habits, and your daily disciplines. The world responds not to what you say you want, but to what you actually believe you deserve. Your life, right now, in its current condition, is the precise echo of the signal you've been sending. If that truth makes you squirm, good. That discomfort is the friction that sharpens awareness. You are not punished for your beliefs. You are ruled by them. So I ask you directly, what frequency are you broadcasting right now? When you wake up in the morning, do you immediately begin thinking about problems or possibilities? When you interact with people, do you apologize for your presence or command attention through your confidence? When you think about your future, do you focus on obstacles or opportunities? When you face challenges, do you look for reasons why you can't succeed or strategies for how you will? Wangari Maathai understood something most never do, that your external world bends to the energy you choose to live from. She had every reason to shrink. She grew up in colonial Kenya, where girls were rarely encouraged to study, where poverty was widespread, and where voicing strong opinions as a woman was seen as dangerous. But instead of internalizing silence, she chose to broadcast strength, clarity, and possibility. She didn't deny her pain. She turned it into action. She didn't wait for permission. She gave it to herself. When she planted trees, she wasn't just healing the land, she was healing her nation spirit. And that shift in frequency changed everything. It pulled opportunities into her orbit she never could have chased down directly. Recognition as the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. A movement, the Green Belt movement, that empowered tens of thousands of women and restored vast ecosystems. Global speaking invitations and influence in ecological and social justice circles. Political appointments and a permanent place in African and world history. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a handout. It was a direct consequence of the frequency she chose to live from. The principle, when you change your frequency, you change your field. When you change your field, you change your future. The uncomfortable question for you to sit with: what frequency have you been broadcasting that keeps attracting the very results you claim to want to escape? And what would happen, really, if you stopped identifying with your limitations and started broadcasting like someone who already has the life you're trying to build? The eighth law. The law of relentless advancement. There is no neutral. In the physics of personal achievement, there is no such thing as neutral. You are either advancing toward your assignment or retreating from it. You are either growing or dying. You are either becoming more of who you were sent to be or less. Most people think they're maintaining when they're actually declining. Michael Jordan understood this principle better than perhaps any athlete in history. Even after becoming the most dominant basketball player of his era, even after winning multiple championships and breaking numerous records, he never allowed himself to believe he had arrived. In 1993, at the peak of his basketball career, Jordan shocked the world by retiring to play professional baseball. Sports analysts called it career suicide. Marketing experts predicted his brand would never recover. Basketball fans felt betrayed. But Jordan understood something that critics missed: stagnation is death, even at the highest levels of success. He had mastered basketball to the extent that continued dominance was no longer developing him as a person. The challenge was gone, and without challenge, there can be no growth. His baseball experiment lasted less than 2 years, but it served its purpose. When he returned to basketball in 1995, he brought a renewed hunger, a deeper appreciation for excellence, and a more sophisticated understanding of leadership. The result was 3 more championships and cement his legacy as the greatest basketball player of all time. Jordan's career illustrates a principle that most people find impossible to accept. Your assignment will always require you to leave comfort zones that others think you should be grateful to occupy. Aliko Dangote could have stopped expanding after becoming Nigeria's most successful businessman. By 2010, he was already worth over $10 billion and controlled significant market share in cement, sugar, and flour across West Africa. Most entrepreneurs would have considered this level of success the culmination of a lifetime's work. But Dangote understood that assignment consciousness doesn't recognize the concept of enough. When you're operating from divine assignment, satisfaction comes not from accumulating wealth or achieving status, but from fulfilling the complete vision that was placed within you. Instead of becoming comfortable with his African success, Dangote began pursuing what many considered an impossible dream: building the world's largest single-train petroleum refinery. This project would require an investment of over $19 billion. Technology that had never been implemented in Africa. Partnerships with global energy companies that had never worked on this scale in Nigeria. Government cooperation across multiple administrations. Market expertise in industries where he had limited experience. Every rational business analysis suggested he should be satisfied with his existing empire and avoid the massive risks associated with the petroleum refinery project. But Dangote was operating from assignment consciousness, not comfort consciousness. He understood that his ultimate assignment wasn't just to become wealthy, it was to transform Africa's industrial capacity and demonstrate that African entrepreneurs could compete with anyone in the world at any level. The Dangote refinery, completed in 2023, is now the largest petroleum refinery in Africa and one of the largest in the world. It has the capacity to process 650,000 barrels of crude oil daily and will transform Nigeria from a petroleum importer to a petroleum exporter. The principle, your assignment will always be larger than your current level of success. The moment you become satisfied with what you've achieved is the moment you begin to betray what you were sent to accomplish. The uncomfortable question for you to consider: what level of success have you been treating as your finish line that might actually be just your starting point? What if what you consider your ultimate goal is actually just your foundation? The ninth law. The law of inevitable opposition. Resistance confirms assignment. Here's a truth that will either inspire you or terrify you. The level of opposition you face is directly proportional to the importance of your assignment. Small dreams attract small problems. Mediocre visions stir only mediocre resistance. But when you step into authentic purpose, when you begin building something that might actually shift the fabric of your society, opposition becomes inevitable, unrelenting, and deeply personal. And hear this clearly. That opposition isn't punishment, it's confirmation. It's life's way of asking, are you just flirting with potential, or are you willing to pay the full price of transformation? Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in a cell, not because he was wrong, but because he was right too soon. Wangari Maathai was beaten and arrested in her own homeland for planting trees that would one day stand as living monuments to environmental justice. Thomas Sankara was branded a radical, isolated by global powers, and assassinated by those closest to him, because his ideas threatened the very structure of exploitation. Aliko Dangote faced constant skepticism and barriers in industries monopolized by foreign powers. He built anyway. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie pushed past literary gatekeeping to redefine how the world hears the African voice, unapologetically, eloquently, and on her own terms. Lamock Bowie stared down warlords and political cowards alike, leading women into the streets with prayers, not weapons, and brought a nation to peace. Not one of them could have reached their level of impact without first confronting the resistance designed to refine their courage, sharpen their vision, and test the steel of their conviction. Here's the uncomfortable reality of your comfort zone. If you're not facing real resistance, chances are you're not walking in your real assignment. If everyone claps, nods, and agrees, you're probably not dreaming big enough. If no one is threatened, disturbed, or stretched by what you're building, it may be because your vision fits too neatly inside the status quo. Strive Mosiliwa, before he built one of Africa's largest telecom empires, spent 5 years in court just trying to get a license. 5 years! That wasn't delay, it was preparation. The legal battle trained his resolve. The resistance gave birth to the resilience that would sustain Econet through continental expansion. Fred Swanica, founder of the African Leadership Group, has faced years of institutional resistance, funding blockades, and doubt from those who said, it's too ambitious. Africa isn't ready. And yet, he builds. He keeps building. Because his opposition is not a warning, it's a signal that the work matters. We often speak of Nelson Mandela in these lectures, and we are right to do so. His courage, his endurance, his magnanimity are etched into the soul of this continent. But let us not forget a truth that history, in its rawest form, demands we acknowledge. Frederick Willem de Klerk, the last president of apartheid South Africa, who worked towards the release of Nelson Mandela, showed a different kind of courage, the rarest kind. The courage to stand against your own tribe when your conscience demands it. It's one thing to challenge your enemies. It's another to defy your allies. To say to your people, we were wrong. That kind of moral clarity costs more than applause, it costs belonging. And de Klerk paid that price. He was ridiculed, branded a traitor, shunned by those whose approval had once defined him. But he did not flinch. He didn't pander. He didn't stall. He acted. And by choosing principle over popularity, he opened a door that could not be closed again, not just for Mandela to walk free, but for millions to finally breathe the air of a shared destiny. Because of that one act of integrity, silent white South Africans, the ones who felt Africa in their bones but never dared claim it aloud, could finally say, "This is our home too." Because of that one decision, love no longer had to apologize for crossing color lines. Because of that one turning point, Charlize Theron could raise black children, not in secret, not as a statement, but as something whole, natural, and fully African. Because as Africans, that is what we do. Mandela called F.W. de Klerk an honorable man and a true son of Africa. And Mandela understood something many miss. It takes more than revolutionaries to remake a nation. It takes those willing to surrender their comfort for conscience. It takes those who will lose everything in order to live in truth. That is moral greatness. And history will not forget Frederick Willem de Klerk. Here's the principle. Opposition is not evidence that you've lost your way. It's often the clearest proof that you finally found it. Resistance is the furnace where real assignments are tested, forged, and purified. Every no is sandpaper for the soul. Every setback, a sharpening. Every closed door, a redirection, not a rejection. The uncomfortable question. So ask yourself, honestly, what resistance are you facing that you've been interpreting as a reason to stop, when it might actually be your reason to keep going? What if the very thing trying to block you is also what's validating you? What if the presence of the storm is the surest sign that your ship is carrying treasure? The great ones weren't spared the fire. They walked through it and came out carrying light. The 10th law. The law of compound momentum. Small actions, monumental results. This final law is subtle in form, yet savage in consequence when ignored. It is billionaires' best-kept secret, and here it is. Extraordinary success is never the product of one colossal act, it is the compound interest of small, deliberate, and often invisible disciplines repeated daily. Yes, daily, especially when it's inconvenient, uninspiring, or unrewarded. The masses worship miracles. They hunger for the lightning bolt, the big break, the overnight ascent. But what they fail to grasp is this: power doesn't arrive in a flash, it gathers, grain by grain, in the shadowed corners of routine. Those who build empires of wealth, of wisdom, of legacy, understand this law. They do not wait for ideal moods or perfect timing. They rise, act, and repeat. Not once. Not occasionally. But relentlessly. The great divide between the dreamers and the doers is this. One seeks inspiration, the other builds it brick by brick through sweat and uncelebrated repetition. Ignore this law and you remain a spectator in the arena of greatness. Obey it, and the results, though slow at first, will one day stand taller than the noise that once distracted you. Warren Buffett became one of the world's wealthiest individuals not through spectacular investment gains, but through the compound effect of consistently applying sound investment principles over 7 decades. He started investing at age 11 with $114.75. By age 30, he was worth about $1 million. By age 60, he was worth $3.8 billion. But here's what most people miss. The vast majority of Buffett's wealth was created after age 60. This is the power of compound momentum. It appears to move slowly at first, but eventually creates results that seem impossible to those who haven't understood the principle. Barack Obama's rise from obscure state senator to president of the United States wasn't the result of sudden political fortune, it was the compound effect of daily disciplines that most people would have considered insignificant. While his colleagues in the Illinois State Senate were focused on immediate political gains and short-term visibility, Obama was engaging in what appeared to be mundane activities. Reading policy papers for hours every night, even on legislation that didn't directly benefit his district. Building relationships with Republicans who could teach him how governance actually worked. Writing detailed position papers on issues that wouldn't be politically relevant for years. Studying the speaking styles and messaging strategies of successful national politicians. Developing fundraising relationships with small donors who couldn't immediately advance his career. None of these activities produced immediate political benefits. Most of his colleagues thought he was wasting time on academic exercises rather than focusing on practical politics. But Obama understood that compound momentum requires you to plant seeds that won't bear fruit for years, trusting that the accumulation of seemingly small actions will eventually create extraordinary results. When he decided to run for US Senate in 2004, these insignificant daily disciplines had created a foundation that his opponents couldn't match. He had deeper policy knowledge, broader coalition relationships, more sophisticated messaging capabilities, and more diverse funding sources than candidates who had been pursuing higher office longer. When he ran for president in 2008, the compound effect became even more apparent. While his opponents were scrambling to develop positions on complex issues, Obama had been studying these issues for years. While they were trying to build fundraising networks, he had been cultivating small donor relationships for over a decade. While they were attempting to craft compelling narratives, he had been developing his storytelling abilities through thousands of hours of practice. The principle, what appears to be sudden success is almost always the result of daily disciplines that were invisible to outside observers. Nelson Mandela's presidency wasn't the result of his negotiation skills during the transition period, it was the compound effect of daily disciplines he maintained throughout 27 years of imprisonment. While other prisoners were focused on surviving day-to-day hardships, Mandela was engaging in activities that seemed irrelevant to his immediate circumstances. Learning Afrikaans so he could understand his oppressors' psychology and communicate with them directly. Studying South African law and constitutional principles that would be necessary for governance. Maintaining physical fitness through daily exercise routines in his tiny cell. Reading biographies of successful leaders and studying their decision-making processes. Building relationships with prison guards and officials who would later become political allies. Developing the emotional discipline necessary to forgive rather than seek revenge. None of these activities helped him get out of prison faster. None of them improved his immediate living conditions. Most observers would have considered them pointless exercises. But Mandela understood that his imprisonment was actually a 27-year leadership development program, and he was determined to graduate with the capabilities necessary to lead a nation through peaceful transition. When he was finally released in 1990, the compound effect of these daily disciplines was immediately apparent. He possessed the psychological insight necessary to negotiate with former enemies, the constitutional knowledge required to design a new government structure, the physical presence and mental clarity needed for the demanding schedule of transition leadership, the emotional maturity necessary to prioritize national healing over personal satisfaction, the strategic relationships that made peaceful transition possible. Without these 27 years of daily preparation, Mandela might have been released as an angry former prisoner seeking revenge. Instead, he emerged as a statesman capable of healing a divided nation. The uncomfortable question for you to consider: what daily disciplines are you avoiding because they don't produce immediate results? What if these seemingly insignificant actions are actually preparing you for responsibilities you can't yet imagine? The Master Principle. Integration and daily application. Your new operating system. You now understand the 10 laws that govern the rise of every legend. But understanding is not transformation. Knowledge without application is just sophisticated ignorance. The question now is not whether these principles work, they are laws, not suggestions. The question is whether you will have the courage to apply them consistently. Especially when doing so makes you uncomfortable. Especially when others don't understand. Especially when the results aren't immediately visible. Here is your new daily operating system. Morning Protocol, the Daily Covenant. Before you engage the world, before you check your phone, before you consume any external input, you must first align your internal frequency with your assignment. 1. Declare your assignment. Stand before a mirror and state aloud, I was not made to wander. I was sent to. Mention your specific assignment. I walk in power. I move with authority. I speak with conviction. Today I advance toward my destiny. 2. Identify your daily advancement. Write down one specific action you will take today that moves you closer to fulfilling your assignment. This cannot be maintenance activity, it must be advancement activity. 3. Broadcast your frequency. Spend 5 minutes visualizing yourself already operating at the level your assignment requires. See yourself commanding the respect, wielding the influence, and making the impact that your destiny demands. Midday recalibration, the authority check. At midday, regardless of where you are or what you're doing, ask yourself these 3 questions. 1. Have I acted today as someone who was sent, or as someone who is lost? 2. Have I moved toward my assignment, or have I been distracted by lesser priorities? 3. Am I broadcasting the frequency of my destiny, or am I rehearsing limitation? If the answers reveal deviation from your assignment, immediately course correct. No explanation, no negotiation, no delay. Evening accountability, the daily reckoning. Before sleep, conduct an honest assessment. 1. Record your proof. What evidence did you create today that you are serious about your assignment? 2. Acknowledge your resistance. What fears, doubts, or hesitations tried to divert you from your path? 3. Commit to tomorrow's advancement. What specific action will you take tomorrow to continue your progression? The uncomfortable challenge, your 90-day assignment test. Here's where we separate those who are genuinely committed to their assignment from those who are merely entertained by the possibility of greatness. For the next 90 days, you will live as if your assignment is the most important mission on Earth, because it is. Week 1 to 30, Foundation. Follow the daily protocol without exception. Take 1 assignment-aligned action daily, regardless of fear or doubt. Stop seeking permission or validation from anyone for pursuing your destiny. End all conversations and activities that reinforce limitation thinking. Week 31 to 60, Acceleration. Increase your daily advancement actions to 3 per day. Begin speaking about your assignment with certainty, not hope. Start building relationships with people who operate at the level your assignment requires. Eliminate all comfort zone activities that are not aligned with your destiny. Week 61 to 90, Manifestation. Take actions that would only make sense if you were certain of your assignment's success. Begin operating in the world as if you already possess the authority your assignment will ultimately grant you. Start creating systems and structures that can handle the magnitude of your eventual impact. Prepare for the opposition that will arise as your assignment begins to manifest. The final question, are you ready for discomfort? Everything I've shared with you works. These are not theories, they are laws that have governed the rise of every significant figure in human history. But they require something that most people are unwilling to give. The willingness to be permanently uncomfortable. Living from assignment consciousness means you will often act before you feel ready. You will frequently stand alone in your convictions. You will regularly face opposition from people who don't understand your vision. You will consistently choose growth over comfort. You will perpetually challenge yourself to become worthy of your assignment. The masses choose comfort and get struggle. Legends choose struggle and get triumph. Maya Angelou captured this perfectly when she said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." Your assignment is your untold story. Every day you postpone it, every day you negotiate with it, every day you seek permission to pursue it is another day you betray the very purpose for which you were born. Aliko Dangote didn't become Africa's richest man by being comfortable. Nelson Mandela didn't transform a nation by avoiding difficult conversations. Barack Obama didn't become president by waiting until he felt qualified. F.W. de Klerk didn't defy his tribe and dismantle apartheid by clinging to comfort, he did it by walking straight into the storm and refusing to flinch. They became legends by embracing the discomfort of living from assignment consciousness, by choosing daily disciplines over daily diversions, by acting on inner guidance rather than external validation.
Congratulations for completing this lecture. But let me say it plainly now. This isn't about inspiration anymore. This is about decision. You've heard the stories. You've seen the thread that runs through every one of them: Dangote, Buffett, Obama, Mandela. Men who understood the long arc of destiny. Men who chose discipline over distraction. Who chose to plant when others were partying, who chose to read when others were resting, who chose to build when nothing was yet visible. They didn't wait to feel ready. They didn't ask for applause. They simply obeyed the assignment. And the world bent to their obedience. This is the uncomfortable truth we've returned to again and again today. You are always broadcasting. Every thought, every word, Every action is sending a signal, declaring to the universe what you truly believe about yourself, and what you believe you deserve. Not what you say you believe. What you live. And so the question that remains is piercing, and it is final. What signal will you broadcast tomorrow morning? Will it be the signal of someone waiting to be discovered? Or the signal of someone already sent? Will you continue negotiating with your greatness, waiting for someone to hand you a crown you were meant to forge yourself? Or will you get up tomorrow and take one uncomfortable step closer to the vision that's been stalking you in your quiet hours? Let me remind you once more, legendary results are not built in leaps. They are carved in secret, in silence, in small acts that appear to yield nothing until suddenly, they yield everything. This is the billionaire's secret. This is the reformer's blueprint. This is the immortal path. And the final, divine imperative is this. You were sent. Not to wander. Not to wish. But to build, to become, to fulfill. So whatever cave you've been avoiding, enter it. Whatever small, hard thing you've been postponing, do it. Whatever story inside you has been clawing to be told, tell it with your life. You are not a mistake. You are a message. And the world is waiting. Stop making it wait. Now rise and walk as one who was sent. Timbuktu Lectures is a production of Kilimanjaro News Network, the authentic voice of Africa. Broadcasting in Swahili, Arabic, Hausa, English, and French. Don't forget to like, share and scan our QR code to access our YouTube channel and website. Revisit this lecture again and again. Share with your friends and family.